Sunday school with you.
Yeah,
Since God sort of started the world over with Noah.
Yes.
Noah.
well, not sort of, he did.
Well, but I mean, since,
Yeah.
he kept Noah and his sons and their wives and stuff. Why did he not bless them? Did those generations become so bad that he had to then sort of ignore all of those to start over with Abraham to become a nation for him?
Well, you have to go through, God always have people that are responsible to him for various things. In the beginning, people were directly responsible to God to worship him. That seems to have evolved, and I'm using that word in the true sense, not in the goofy sense that they use it in so-called science today, into a thing where the head of the household was the person who was charged with the responsibility for spiritual truth. And that continued in Abraham's day. So Abraham was responsible for in Noah's day, Noah was responsible for his household. And in fact, what happened when Noah built the ark? He brought all of his family, his 3 sons and their 3 wives, as well as his wife, into the ark. So he was a spiritual leader in the home. The problem is, as the world degenerated for the second time, and of course, what is the immediate degeneration after the flood? The Tower of Babel. And just for the record, when I was a kid, I pictured that they really thought that there was a door up in the sky someplace, and they were going to build a ladder up and open the door and they walk into God. What was the Tower of Babel?
Just wanted to show that they could do it.
Perhaps, but it was something. What was it? Physically, what was it?
It was a tower.
That is not the right word.
Man's accomplishment.
You're looking at metaphors. What physically was it?
A building.
Pile of rocks.
No, it was a building.
It was a building. What kind of building?
Temple.
It was an observatory. They understood, even in those days, that the higher you got,
The better you could sing.
the better you could see what?
The sky.
The sky.
How do you know that though? Because it just says we're gonna build a tower that reaches to the heavens so we can make a name for ourselves.
Yeah, they were astrologers. And that's where astrology begins. And you have that all through not just the ancient Babylonians, but the new Babylonians and the Chaldeans, all of whom continued to practice right down to Daniel's day and beyond, right down till the Muslim invasion of the 6th century, idolatry, or the worship of the stars, astrology. And that's where the part of the world where astrology really started.
So where do you see that?
Well, I see that from the standpoint that they said that they were building this thing to unite all of them. What were they uniting in? The worship of those astronomical things. And we know that from history.
But how do you know that? It doesn't say that.
We know that because of the history of what happened, that's where that astrology, and it spread around the world from there.
So is that in some other account besides scripture?
Yeah. So they were people who were forming this religion. And what is astrology? What is astrology?
Study of-
Like worshiping stars and planets.
But it is, but what is it? It's not worship in the sense that a Christian should worship God. It's maybe the way that many Christians in America claim to worship God. What is astrology?
It's using the stars to explain certain events that happen,
And not just to explain them, but to what?
to tell
You mean
why.
like horoscopes?
Happened.
To manipulate them. That if I know the stars, I can use the stars to plot out my future. And
Much like horoscopes.
so that's, yeah,
Ruins in that.
yeah. So that all gets its start there. And these people were building this giant observatory. Obviously, they didn't have what an observatory today has, which is
Telescope.
telescopes, but they knew that the higher you go, the better you can see. Why is that? Before we had the Hubble, and what's the new one after the Hubble? Oh, there's a newer one, better.
Well, they were satellites.
Yeah, better space telescopes. Where were the best observatories in the world?
The mountains.
Yeah, they were on mountain peaks.
Now, isn't it true also that back then they had no pollution? There was, so wouldn't the skies be clearer than they were
But the
now?
higher you go.
I know.
We don't know how much pollution they had.
They're heating their burning wood.
They burned wood.
But how many people were there?
Well, if you go back 300 or 400 years
How
ago,
much they multiplied.
yeah, if you go back 300 or 400 years ago, you couldn't see the sky in London on any day of the week. Why?
Coal.
Because they were burning coal. And maybe it wasn't the quote unquote greenhouse gases, it wasn't methane in that, but what was it? Soot. And when you burn a lot of wood, do you remember going to creation?
I didn't go to creation. It was too hot. The sun and everything.
Oh.
Yeah.
But what was it like? What was it like at creation? A lot of times you couldn't see the stars at night, could you?
Oh, because of yellow fires.
Because there were all those fires. And there was 100,000 people. Well, that was previous to certain things happening, like transportation. The largest cities in the world were somewhere around 100,000 people. You get 100,000 people burning wood, you've got an awful lot of smoke. Now, was it everywhere in the world? No, but wherever there were people didn't spread evenly across the world. What do people always do?
Congregate together.
Yeah. Why did the founding fathers of America say that the election for president isn't just a popular vote? It's the Electoral College?
Cities would determine the outcome.
Because about 5 or 6 cities in America would determine the outcome. And that would have been true in colonial days.
That were people that spread out from there also affected their lives.
Exactly. But Wyoming, all of Wyoming has less people by far than the 15th largest city in America is larger than the whole state of Wyoming in population. Something like that. So people, they wouldn't count at all. Well, that's always been the case. The vast majority of people congregate together. That's why when you read the Bible, what do you see throughout the Bible? What's the political situation throughout the Bible?
You have the tribes.
Well, you have tribes in Israel, but what was the world situation? And we trace them right through one into another.
Kings over the.
Are you
There
talking
were
about
kings,
Which
but
king
very
versus-
quickly, there, it's not even kings that matter. What is it? Emperors who are over empires. People congregate into larger and larger gatherings. So you have, who rules the world? Well, you've got Nineveh, who is the Assyrian Empire. Then you have Babylon. Throughout all of that, you had in the south, Egypt. And again, was Egypt even population? Where was all the people in Egypt? Right along the Nile. Was the population of Assyria spread evenly across that?
It's never been.
Yeah.
Even distribution of.
So for the vast majority of people, Paul, they were where there would have been pollution. Maybe out there someplace there's not, but where we are, there's lots of smoke.
All right, if the Tower of Babel is an observation, observatory, is it on a mountain?
Probably. Now, again, a mountain for that part of the world. We are not talking Mount Everest.
30,000.
We're probably not even talking the Rocky Mountains. And it's not, you've got to balance two things with that. Because could they build it on top of a big mountain?
Okay.
Yes.
Not so well.
Good flat area.
Part of
Well, you've got a bigger problem than a big flat area.
your logistics of moving the building material.
How do you get the building material up a mountain? And for us, yes, we can do that because we have machinery. But without machinery, taking heavy stuff like rock up mountainsides is not an easy task. And mining the rock up there is not easy because they don't have dynamite. They don't have blasting to blast the rock free.
Land was probably like Jerusalem, because Jerusalem was up,
Right.
you know.
So we're talking of when by mountain, probably something in the 3,000 foot range, something like that.
Still enough, but we can't figure out how they got stuff into the pyramids.
Yep. But by the time Noah comes, you've got the head of each household is the priest, is the person. But now when you come to Abraham, what happens?
So it's just from his family. So it's
Yes.
It quickly becomes really large.
No, it doesn't.
Well, not quickly, I mean.
Not even eventually.
Right.
I'm sorry. Because what's the entire population of all the Jews in the world today? Yeah, out of how many? 8 billion people? And there's what, maybe 15 million, 20 million Jews in the whole world? So, what percentage is that? Well, it's way under 1%. But what that means is, by the time you come to Abraham, when's Abraham? No. No. Oh, come on. What's our timetable? 2000 BC. Abraham, 2000 BC. David, 1000 BC. Moses was 1400-ish BC. So by 2000 BC, God says Abraham will be, and his descendants will be my priests. What does that mean in practical terms? You live in China, if you want to know God, you've got to come. You've got to come to Israel. If you live in the Celtic regions up in northern Britain and you want to know God, really know God, you've got to come to Israel. Why did God put Israel where it is? Look at a map.
Crossroads.
Because it is the place where what happens?
Trade.
It's the only place in the world where this happens. Israel is the only route connecting 3 continents. That doesn't happen anywhere else in the world. Europe, you want to go from Europe to Africa? You go through Israel. You want to go from Africa to Asia? You got to go through Israel. You want to go from Southern Asia to Europe? You've got to go through Israel. Every major trade route in the world at that point ran through Israel. What did that mean? Every society would have the opportunity to learn about God because they would have to pass through Israel. But now God limited it, but he doesn't stop there because he doesn't just say, Abraham. Then what does he do? He refines it further.
Takes it from his 2 sons to the same.
But he narrows it down from all of Abraham's children to, well, he goes through that, but to just Aaron, 1 tribe out of 13.
As the priest.
So if you want to go to God, you have to come through Aaron's family now. So in each of those things, it becomes more and more focused on who is the connection between God and humanity. And of course, the final narrowing is Jesus. And now there is one God and one mediator, the man Christ Jesus.
Well, and God sure made it an awful more difficult task for people because starting back at the Tower of Babel, he's the one who spreads them all over the place and changes their languages so they can't even communicate
Yep.
at all with each other.
Yep.
I mean, for people who have no time for God, that looks pretty awful. You know?
Yep. There are
So
consequences.
again, it's really seek him and seek him and seek him.
Yep. Yep.
Getting back to Noah, with what dispensation would that be, conscious or human government? Where would he lie?
In both. And of course, the other change that happens with Noah is the institution of government. Before Noah,
So on one side,
before the time of the flood, which is midway through, actually toward the end half of Noah's life. How old is Noah when the flood hits? He's way up.
Dies at 600.
Yeah.
he only has 3 sons. out of
Yep.
the deal? That many?
Noah, before that, how was justice done? We can get to how was justice done? Somebody kills me. How was justice done?
The family.
Yeah, or whoever supports me goes and kills them. And then whoever backs the person that killed me that's now killed, does what?
Somebody else.
They come back to come after them. And then the people that were backing them. And so with Noah, God says, no, there has to be an organized, whoever sheds man's blood. By man, there has to be a system. By man, his blood will be shed. You're now responsible to come up with a system to provide for justice.
That came after the flood, right?
Yep. Genesis 9:6. What does Genesis 9:6 establish?
Capital punishment.
Capital punishment. Was Genesis 9:6 ever superseded by the law of Moses or by the New Testament? Either one. No, in fact, it is ratified by both of them. Because the law of Moses posits that people who do certain acts, what will be the punishment?
Must die.
Death. In the New Testament, where is that done? Romans 13. What does Romans 13 say about that? Because I know there are a lot of people running around today that claim to be Christians that say, oh, we can't have capital punishment. That's barbaric. No, that's that's Old Testament. No, it's not. It's New Testament. What's Romans 13 say?
He is God's servant to do you good, and if you do wrong, be afraid, for he does not bear the sword for nothing. He is God's servant, the angel of wrath to bring punishment on you.
He is the governmental official, is the agent of wrath to bring punishment. And what tool does he have to bring punishment?
Sword.
Sword
All right. What does the sword do?
kills.
Does the sword do?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah, if you have a big piece of bread.
Yeah. What does the sword do?
You know,
It kills. He could have said he bears not what? The whip. Because what did the whip do?
Punish, but
It punishes, but
Does not kill.
generally is not used to kill.
Oh, yeah, I guess it can kill.
Yeah,
It can,
yeah, you can be in.
but generally you did not whip a person to death. If you sentenced a person to whipping, they would probably survive it. But he says, he doesn't say he bears not the whip in vain. That would be, he has the right to punish, but he can only go so far. He bears not the sword. What do you do with a sword?
Kill.
Off with their head, chop. So that's never repealed, Old or New Testament. And so anybody who claims to be a Christian and says, oh, you can't be a Christian, we're supposed to just show mercy.
And it's really strong though in the Exodus 21:12 verse, because it says anyone who strikes him and kills him, shall surely be put to death.
Yep.
It doesn't even say in Ecclesiastes where it says if it's not done in a fashionable time or that's why we have more crime.
Yep.
Like now, I mean, there's somebody, I think they were accused of killing somebody in the 70s and their trial just finished up. They're giving them now, I'm surprised they're not dead.
Well, it's like spare the rod, spoil the child.
Well, we have settled on our universal means of capital punishment in America.
Keep him in jail forever.
No, you can't do that. What is the mode of capital punishment we have settled upon?
Lethal injection.
Nope,
Life in prison?
old age.
Containment.
Yeah.
We're gonna kill you by old age.
It was funny, that movie Knight Rider 2000, they don't just put them in prison, they freeze them. And then we'll fall them in like thousands of years, and like, that's actually gonna do anything, cause
Yeah.
they'll be sedated, it'll be like, oh, I was in for like a second, and now I'm out.
Now, in the midst of that, we have the whole thing of an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. And people say, well, that's justification for returning violence. What actually is an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth?
It's a measure, like what you, if you did this, then you would get that amount of punishment.
The degree.
You missed a word. You would get only. Because what is our general response?
You need a bottle of water.
I don't think it's going to do me any good. What is our general response? It's my allergies, and it's just they're killing some of us. What is our general response to
Give back,
provocations?
give back more than you got.
Yeah,
Double.
yeah. So if you hit me, I'll hit you twice. If you break a bone, I'll break 5 bones.
You dent my car, I smashed yours.
Yeah. You key my car, I take a baseball bat and smash out all the windows.
Get even, I get ahead.
Head. Yeah. And that is the natural inclination of human beings.
Yeah.
So what an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth sets is, as Ron said multiple times,
Fair.
a maximum. It has to be proportional. You can't escalate just because somebody, I'll teach him. He thinks he did this,
Fix him.
I'll do, no. You're limited to only restorative levels of punishment.
I had some lawyers in class where Jewish lawyers, and they were talking about, which I wasn't that, I've heard of it, but you probably, I know you're more a historian than I am, but the law of Hammurabi.
Yes.
Was that first? They were saying it was first.
Hammurabi was probably 300 years or so before Abraham.
Is that the first codified law? Is that what-
That is the first codified law that we're aware of. Now, there are some in China that may be almost as old. But Hammurabi tried to establish the first of what we would call today a nation founded on laws. Rather than, remember, what was almost every nation founded on in that period of time? Perhaps, but generally within a nation, it wasn't just might. They had a theory of what was the right. The arbitrary word of the king. The king was the law. So if the king said you're guilty,
Thank you.
no more question. If you say, wait a minute, that wasn't a law 10 minutes ago.
It is now.
If he says tough, then tough.
No, he says, I hereby decree.
Yeah, I hereby decree. So, yeah, exactly. So what the Code of Hammurabi began, and what coming down to the American Revolution was that that nations would be founded on law rather than personality. So therefore, and we reached the apex of that with the American Revolution, because what we said was we don't have a king. In order for a person to be found guilty, there has to be a law. They have to have rules. You have certain rights that can't be taken away from you.
You say founded on law rather than founded on personality?
I wouldn't say personality, on the
Ruling
fiat of the king.
Ruling authority.
And specifically, I'm using the word king. Why? Because the whole idea was that the king was the absolute authority. He was God's representative on earth. And therefore he spoke with the voice of God and could do whatever he wanted. And whatever he said goes. What was the theory that came under? You ever heard that theory? The divine right of kings. The divine right of kings. And that literally held until, what was the date of the Magna Carta? 12 something? 12 something, I think, with the Magna Carta. The Magna Carta was the first time in human history that they said, no, the king does not have a divine right to do whatever he wants.
That was the King of England.
That was the King of England. The barons came together against the King of England and said, no, we're going to have a compact between us that you're not allowed to do whatever you want. There'll be a set of laws that both of us have to follow. That's the first time in human history that, we take that for granted today. Yeah. So anyway, that.
Can I change the subject a little? I have a
Yep.
question on something.
Yeah.
Let me just explain this out. So, we've talked about this. I know you've talked about it before, but I heard a message on, and it basically deals with, body, soul, and spirit, but I want to kind of
Okay.
put this out to you first. I was listening to a guy named Alan Jackson. He's
Yep.
on the radio.
Hell yeah.
And he was mentioning, he says, I am a spirit, I have a soul, I live in a body. He said the soul is the emotions and thoughts. Obviously, the spirit would be the God conscious. And you don't have God conscious. You have the ability to have it, but you don't until you're born again. We know what the body is. He said the satisfaction of the body is pleasure, the satisfaction of the soul is happiness, the satisfaction of the spirit is joy. Self-discipline would be the soul and the body. And I'm going to throw one other thing in there. When it says God created man in his image, or let us create man in our image, I always thought that meant will, intellect, and emotion. Can you put that together for me?
Yeah. I'm gonna kind of bend what he said a little bit. Spirit, what is spirit? Let's start there.
God is spirit.
Spirit is the ability to interact on the plane beyond the physical. Do dogs have a sense of eternity? When Ecclesiastes says God has put eternity in the heart of humanity, the only reason we can interact with eternity is because of our spirits.
Spirit, the ability to
Interact with eternity. Anything outside of the physical realm. So when you have somebody like, what's his name? The famous pseudoscientist of the 70s, Carl Sagan. He said, the universe is all that is, all that was, or all that will ever be. We know that's not true.
knows it too now.
And he knows it. But he knew it then. A part of us, we can try to convince ourselves that's true, but that we know that there's something more than that.
Because we have it in us.
Yeah. Because we have the spirit that can touch beyond the physical.
And is that verse Ecclesiastes 3:14 or something like that?
3:11.
3:11.
3:11?
So that's that's the spiritual component. What is the soul?
Emotions and brain.
I'm gonna say something a little different, and I'm not gonna use a modern term. I'm gonna go back to what the Bible posits as the soul. It is the power to choose. I am not merely an instrument of God. The heavens are the instrument of God. He set them in place, caused them to move, and guess what? They're still moving according to his principles, however much longer. They don't violate his principles. The stars don't choose their orbits. The planets don't choose their orbits. Inanimate objects don't choose anything. It is the power of the soul to choose. And that's why God says to them, I've put you in a garden, that tree is off limits. And as a soul, they had the ability
Finally.
to say, yes, I'll stay away from it, or no, I won't.
But weren't they spiritually alive then? Like,
Yep, but that soul was the power to choose. They're not simply bound to God's will. You could be a spirit and still be totally bound to God's will.
You're not a puppet.
But the angels apparently have some level of soul because they chose. But we're not puppets. That ability that soul, do animals have souls?
yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
Anybody who's had a dog, and certainly a cat,
Oh,
knows that they can choose. You ever had a dog just look at you and you go, come here?
Forget it.
And the dog looks at you and goes, I ain't coming there no matter what you say. I'm running away. Catch me if you can.
my
Yeah. But see, that's the power of, that's that soulish power. Now, do emotions come into that? Absolutely. But emotions without the power to choose wouldn't matter. Because if I had all the emotions, but I couldn't make choices, I wasn't separate from God's will, where I can choose. My emotions would be irrelevant. They'd be predetermined.
Would will, intellect, and emotion be on the soul?
Yeah. But the most important part of that is that will. The will is the central part of it. The others just feed into emotions and intellect and all that. The center of the soul is that will. I can choose. Yes or no. Choose this day who you will serve. I am separate from God's will. I am not an automaton. I'm not a robot. I'm not simply programmed to do, input in, input out. At the end of the day, and that's why we constantly hear, oh, the reason there's so much crime is because of poverty. But why is it? Maybe not a lot, but there's a significant number of people that grow up in the worst possible situations, but become wonderful people. On the other side of that, there's people that grow up with every advantage and become horrible, rotten scoundrels. Why? Because at the end of the day, I can choose. No matter what input I have. I'm not just a machine. Do computers have intellect? Yeah, they have logic. They have information that they can process, and with these new, with these new AIs, they can process that logic and put it together in new ways. They can write a 100,000-word novel in 3 seconds.
But I learned the hard way, just because they have information. If they have the wrong information, it doesn't necessarily mean they're gonna give right information.
But see, they don't have the power to choose.
Yeah, the tone.
They are bound by their programming, period. We have the power to choose. That's what that soul is. And that separates us from the inanimate objects of creation.
But does an animal have a lesser soul? Is that kind of what?
Certainly. Certainly. Are their choices as broad or as reasoned or as thorough as ours? Yeah,
They
no.
don't have that spirit at all, right? They just
Right.
have soul.
But again, when they make choices, their choices are entirely based on,
At the time.
not just at the time, on physical. We can make choices that go way beyond the physical. I can choose to jump on the hand grenade, knowing that it's going to cause me tremendous pain. I'll probably be dead. But I do that not because I'm going to get great pleasure out of it, but I do it for a transcendent reason, to save the life of the people around me. What do I get out of that?
What would a mother animal do if
Yeah, I was
something
gonna
to
say.
get, you know?
Yeah, so from that standpoint, now, how much of that is programmed into their instinct? We use that,
I'd say it all would be.
maybe. And yet I have known animals. I knew a cow that we had on the farm that we literally had to, from the last month of her pregnancy. And cows get pregnant every year, so they keep giving milk. At the last month, we had to keep her in the barn. She could not go outside. Because whenever she had a calf, she tried to kill it immediately. She would stomp it to death. We had to put her there in the thing so we could monitor when she was getting close to having the calf, because she would kill that calf in a heartbeat. Well, that's some failure of
Yeah.
that instinct, because the normal instinct for an animal is to protect their young, to even give their lives for their young at a certain level. So I think it's more complicated. I'm just saying, we want a simple solution. It's that or this. I think that there's a lot of streams
There
running
is
into
no
that river,
spirit. There is no spirit.
but they do not have that eternal perspective.
They have no God conscience.
No God conscious, no.
Just because they don't understand the world around them doesn't mean that they're not a part of it, like a part of.
Correct. It's not that they don't understand. They understand the world around them very
I
much,
mean, they don't understand.
but they don't
God.
understand.
They don't understand God, the
Future.
creator.
Eternity.
Yeah, they don't understand the things beyond the world around them.
Yeah.
You know how you.
And that's why I say, when I choose to jump on a hand grenade, I am putting something beyond this earthly life above the earthly life.
You could also say that we are the only living creature that buries their dead.
Yep,
So, and why do we do that? It's because of eternity.
yep.
Now, you're also saying like how humans are always trying to find something to fill the gap that God put in, like whether it's an idol or something, whereas an animal would not have that urge to look for something.
Yep. All of those things. They don't make idols. They don't make altars.
Change this just a tiny bit more based on something you said. Do you think that at some point artificial intelligence can go beyond its own programming?
I don't
I
know.
think that's a serious danger to consider.
Oh, every time I see people doing this, I I had experience 40 years ago, 35 years ago. I had something called chest wall syndrome. It's where the muscles under the ribs around the lungs swell up, get infected and swell up, and they crush your lungs. And you can't breathe because it's just agony. I had to go on heavy antibiotics for several days before they shrunk down and I could breathe right again. I didn't sleep for about 48 or 50 hours straight because I was in so much agony. They gave me Percocet, I think, something like that. And I do not do well with painkillers. I don't take them other than Tylenol and Motrin. And I literally started seeing spiders on the wall, which is one of the things of being psychotic. I was really out there. And in the middle of all that, I watched the Arnold Schwarzenegger movie because I was just sitting there staring at things, the Terminator. And I'm like, the computers are taking it. You know, you can imagine being in that state of just whacked out, how that would affect you. Every time these people start playing with these things with computers, I ask just one question. Did they never see the Terminator?
You know, I watched last night on YouTube, I was watching a political, and it was just a picture of Donald Trump, a picture of, I forget who else, somebody else that I really agree with. And they were talking, and in between them, they had a picture of, Tulsi Gabbard, you know.
Yeah.
Right,
And they
yeah.
were talking about, you know, her, how good she is, and they had like him here, a picture of the other guy there, and she was in the middle, and she was like a little bit above them, and from here down, she was dressed very provocatively, and they started talking, they were talking about relative things to politics, and then they were saying how good Chelsea was, and then they started talking about she would look good in this. It was all AI. It was all generated by computer. You would have thought it was them saying it.
Yeah.
I said, they can lie about anything now. They can
Yeah.
put it in your
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's-
I was terrified enough when I saw the movie Wag the Dog, where they very primitive things. If you've never seen that movie, it's a fascinating movie. Where this president is besieged by political drama. So he starts a fake he starts a fake war. And he literally has all these pictures of refugees being bombed and all this, and they're making it in a laboratory. And this was back when that was just becoming, and the whole population gets behind him to invade this country because they've seen all these pictures that were made up. Now, how far have we come from 30 years ago or so when that came out?
This scared me when I saw it.
Yeah. Yep.
There's a movie that came out years ago called AI. I think it was called AI. It was about
That was done by,
Yeah.
Steven Spielberg.
Yeah.
Maybe. I don't remember, like, the mother wanted a son or she had a
Yeah.
son that died or something.
Yeah.
And they programmed it and it is incredible.
Oh, yeah.
Equally scary.
Yep.
My goodness.
And I'll just be very, in 1894, the keynote speaker at the Southern Baptist Convention, maybe it was 1896, one of those two dates, the keynote speaker at the Southern Baptist National Convention, the topic of his sermon was, God will never let man fly. That is the providence of the angels. Man will never be allowed to fly.
And his sons are the ones that float,
Yeah,
right?
And it was Reverend Wright and his sons, Wilbur and Orville, said, hey, Dad.
Yeah.
So I'm just saying that to be very careful that when we start to put things in God's mouth about what God will or won't allow.
Also be a great tool, see.
Oh, yeah. Well, where in the Bible do we have something about that?
The image of the beast.
The image of the beast is able to speak and to make people worship.
Yeah.
Now, for many, many years, that was sort of like a tape recording but what if it's really that. The image of the beast can literally reason.
Well, you know where that's from. Remember, what apocalypse movie was it where they put the VR headsets on?
Yeah.
It was the being that was talking
Yeah.
to them.
But again, with AI, what a tool to make an idol actually speak, not just regurgitate a tape recorded message,
Yeah.
but actually construct arguments
Conversations and, yeah,
to convince people of the truth of.
any price.
Yeah.
Well, that's what he did.
Scary
That's what he
stuff.
did in the VR set.
Yep.
Said, what would
Oh,
you
yeah.
like? And then when they came out of it, they had the mark on their hand.
Yep.
And you're pushing it more and more and more, which is not surprising either.
Yeah.
Right.
About the only place that is pushing back against that is professional writing right now.
Yeah.
I'm trying to get published, and if you send in stuff for to get published today, there's a whole thing. We will not publish anything produced by AI, or any derivation of
How
chat.
can they prove that though? Like back when I was in college and I graduated in 73, already by that time could not take off. Like if I wanted to apply to go to the University of Pittsburgh after I graduated from this. I
There's
could
a
not have
example.
sent a video tape of my audition because there was no proof that it was a.
That you hadn't doctored it.
Yeah,
There's
and
algorithms.
that's been a long.
But
time.
there's that with this, there's algorithms that will say, yeah, this is, and now they have, also for when people write reports,
In there, so you know.
you just feed that, there's a website, you feed their report or their any kind of written thing that that kids do, and it'll tell you the percentage that was copied from other sources.
Yeah.
That was for plagiarization. So it's really dangerous to plagiarize today.
Technically, AI is nothing more but repetitive tasks.
Yeah,
the
you might
computer
become
does.
president of Harvard.
Yeah,
Yes.
but then you might get fired and disgraced.
The other three were just as guilty and.
They haven't gotten it yet.
Yeah, but she probably has some other great job.
Yeah, right.
Now she's heading to Yale.
Hey, guys, God bless.
See you all. Take care, Paul.
Have a good night,
Thanks all.
everyone.
Thank you.
Everybody have a good time, and Derek.
Thank you. We'll see you guys in a